First off, I want to thank the brave men and women who work behind the wall. I want to thank them on a national level because their job goes unrecognized.
How do they try to turn a guard?
Well, correctional officer. Sorry, I apologize. But correctional officer.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi, host of Tier Talk. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Today we're going to be talking about training, but we're going to kind of bring a balance between the training that correctional officers get and the training that our brave men and women who work police get. Basically, I'm trying to bring about the connection to law enforcement. Obviously, we all know Russ Hamilton, the founder of Keepers of Chaos and a regular on my show. And on the bottom here, we definitely should know who Tommy is. Tommy has a YouTube channel called Free Field Training.
Today on Free Field Training, we're going to be testing the Safe Life Defense duty belt. They say it is one of the strongest police duty belts you can get. Here goes. Let's see.
Expert in a lot of things when it comes to law enforcement, but more specifically here, training and equipment. So I think we can kind of have a great dialogue that covers both, because Russ has a kind of a very good expertise on the equipment that we use, our training, and then we're going to combine that with the training that police get. And hopefully people watch this video and will see that both entities deserve both. Maybe there's some training that corrections get that police don't get. Who knows? But this is what this topic is going to be about. We're going to try to discover some parallels and maybe some inconsistencies. So when we come back from our sponsors, we're going to discuss training, both for police and corrections, and see where they parallel and see where they kind of separate. I stand by for our sponsors.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
All right, thank you for listening to our sponsor. Okay, so real quick, guys, we all know Russ Hamilton. Russ, can you give us a little shout out about what you're doing right now with that Facebook page?
Okay, yeah, right now on my Facebook page, I got it up and running. I've got over 500 members so far in the past 5 days, I think it is. I'm calling it Keepers of Chaos. That's chaos with a K. And I'm just trying to bring a lot of good content, which is where the Tier Talk YouTube channel comes in. And I'm networking with you and Gary York and Keith Hellwood. And I'm just trying to really provide a base to drive your guys' sites, but also to have my own thing where we can bring good content, good knowledge, good training to these correctional officers that deserve that. And some aren't getting it.
Yeah, and I also see the really good interactions on that Facebook page. I'm really enjoying it. I'm actually seeing a lot of participation. So great job, Russ. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Anthony.
All right, so Tommy from Free Field sorry, that's a tough one, Tommy. Tommy from Free Field Training. Tommy, I've been watching your videos now for a little over a year. I've seen you grow. I think now you're almost at, or maybe over 97,000 followers. I love what you provide. Well, yeah, it's crazy, Russ. But he provides really good material on training, equipment. I mean, I would love to see more of our people travel over to his channel because I think, again, the worlds are very similar. Plus, Tommy's being very busy. So just for the fact that he's coming on and talking with us correctional professionals shows me he has respect for the field. But Tommy, I want to ask you a few questions. If you don't mind telling the audience a little bit about your channel, but also, why did you feel the channel was needed?
Well, Free Field Training it started off as a mistake, kind of a happy mistake. I was making videos and putting them on my flash drive of simple things that guys at work weren't getting training in, or it was kind of a pain to teach all the time. Things like note-taking, proper note-taking, so you can go back and reference to them, and counterfeit currency and things like that. And a buddy of mine said, well, just put them on YouTube and leave them up there, and then you can access them from the car terminal whenever you want. You don't have to carry your own flash drive around, and you can have them and other people can use them too. And I said, all right, sure. So I put it up and they started getting views, and it's just kind of spiraled from there. And the idea of it now is to have an open source of non-OPSEC law enforcement and security training. So someone that's trying to get into the field or is new in the field, or those guys on police departments where they send them to a police academy and then they never get any training after that. They don't go through a field training process or anything. At least have something to try to get them a little further along than just do it as it comes.
I like that. I'll be honest with you, Tommy. I think that's one of our weaknesses in both professions, corrections and police, is the refresher courses that are needed. So I love the department stepping up, or Tommy actually stepping up to make sure that we know where we're at and if anything's changed. You know, what you learned first year in the field is going to be a lot different than where we're at 25 years later. And that kind of brings me to the topic that I want to discuss today. The first thing I want to discuss is the training that police get and the training that corrections get, and just to see where the similarities are, because right now some states consider corrections law enforcement, some states don't, and a big part of that recognition comes to the training that are being given to our brave men and women that work both behind the wall and on the streets. And I want to highlight that for the states that have leaned towards giving the trust of law enforcement over to corrections, where their training is, and then obviously there's some states right now that just don't have that good training. So I thought maybe we can discuss right now the type of trainings that run parallel. So what I'll do is I'll start with Tommy first. So when you're getting ready to go to the academy for a police officer, right, what type of training is going to be provided to you throughout the course of your time in the academy?
Well, that depends on the state. Here in Illinois, it's statutory what blocks and how much time they have to spend on each one. But a lot of it isn't set in stone what they have to cover in those blocks. So at a police academy in Illinois, you're going to spend somewhere between 16 and 24 weeks, depending on what agency is doing the academy. I think the minimum right now is 14. And then most places bump it to 16 to have extra space in the training regimen in case people miss time on injuries or other things, family matters. So in that 16 weeks, you're going to get a block on use of force. I think it's an 8-hour block now. You're going to get about 300 hours of training in firearms, about 200 hours on defensive tactics and control tactics, so your use of handcuffs, takedown tactics, things like that. There's going to be numerous law blocks that are taught generally by attorneys, and there's going to be scenario-based training, which started really in earnest when I came out about 10 years ago, well, 13 years ago now. But it started in earnest about a decade ago with scenario training, making that a regular part of police training. And then attached to that scenario training, you would do a scenario, and then you'd have to write a report based on that scenario, just the narrative section to give people an idea of how to write reports. And they do, depending on your agency, some agencies will write reports in third person or some in first person. And they would kind of tailor the training to that. Now that's for like your multi-agency training. So I went to the Police Training Institute at the University of Illinois, and there they have people from all over. So there's people all the way from Rockford and all the way down south of Springfield, which is the length of the state of Illinois. The Chicago Police Academy does a similar academy, but it's set up just for Chicago. If you're an outside agency, you can send people to it. They have you there for, I think, the first 16 or 18 weeks. And then there's 4 additional weeks of Chicago law and just how Chicago PD does things after that. And the Illinois State Police have a similar thing. You can go to the Illinois State Police Academy as, a municipal police officer anywhere if your agency sends you, and then they attach a section of vehicle code to the end of it that's designed just for the Illinois State Police.
Right.
So that's the basic academy training in Illinois, kind of in a nutshell. And then interspersed in there is other smaller things, like every morning you're doing PT, but you can do that anywhere.
Well, I'll tell you something. I see some similarities, but some differences. I'm going to forward over to Russ, but I definitely think when it cuts into the vehicle side of things, a lot of us may not be getting that. And I still think that we do need it because we do have rover patrols who do commit to pullovers, especially vehicles that are unidentified that come onto grounds. But Russ, what type of training would you expect to see? Because California is one of the states that lead in training for correctional officers. So it's great to start at the zenith because then we know exactly where the other states need to be. So how do you work out your blocks? What kind of training do you get out in California?
Well, now what happens in California a lot, they did have the California Academy at what time up to 16 weeks, I think it was. They pared that back down now, though, to 12, I believe. Seems like they're changing a lot. It's really hard to keep up. But the first thing that they do is they give the 40-hour powers of arrest course, and that's a 40-hour course just so you know the legalities with regard to actually taking someone into custody, and also with regard to restraints and that sort of thing. And then they branch out from there, and they do other things like crime scene preservation, disturbance control, and all those other things. There's absolutely nothing to do with the vehicle code involved there, but the rest of it has to do with a lot of the court orders that the department is under, because they've obviously been a target of a lot of different inmate actions. So that's a whole set. I think that's almost a 1-week set of different court cases that we have to adhere to, and then there's the mandatory. I'm not sure how long it is now. I think it's a 40-hour firearms course that we have to go through. And we have the Glock. I can't remember now if it's a Model 22 or 23 40 caliber, Ruger Mini 14, and we used to have to do the shotgun, but we don't use the shotguns anymore. The 870 Wingmaster. But so our primary two right now are the Glock. I can't remember if it's Model 22 or 23, and the Ruger Mini 14.
All right. So first off, obviously there's definitely a difference with the training in regards to firearms. Looks like he mentioned that where he's at, they get over 300 hours, where we're only getting 40. But we do have those specialized teams that obviously get a lot more training. But I'm assuming, Tommy, the training that you're getting on firearms is very tactical training?
Well, no, Illinois has the same basic 40-hour requirement. So if you're a correctional officer or a probation, parole, any of those government agencies that are not the police that carry firearms for a living. In fact, it's the same for security guards in Illinois. They do that 40-hour class. It's like your familiarization. This is a gun. This is the end that you point at things that you want to destroy. Don't touch that part. Here's how a magazine goes and stuff like that. With law enforcement, they try to do a little more familiarization. So we'll intertrain a little bit with, like, I have a Glock. This guy's got an HK. That guy's got a SIG. And also you need to know how a wheel gun works. They do shotguns and rifles as a familiarization at that same 40-hour level, but it's its own thing. So you do 40 hours of just shotguns and rifles at the academy level. And then with handguns, you have people, remember, that are coming on that have never touched these things before. And they're taking them through that initial 40-hour handgun class and getting to the point at the end where they can move and shoot effectively. And that's a huge jump from somebody that at the beginning has done nothing to at the end is doing that. You're not taking somebody that's already into guns and doing it. So that takes a lot of time to get people to where they can move and shoot or fire a double tap and actually hit what they're aiming at. That's a huge jump in skill in 16 weeks. And so a class that I might be able to teach you already knowing about guns in, a week and have you good to go, it's going to take someone that's never done it before a lot longer. And that's where that large hour number comes in. I don't think that's statutory, that hour number.
Now, let me ask a question. When do you have to go back to requalify for your right to carry? Is it every 6 months?
Yeah, in Illinois, it's bi-yearly. You have to qual. And one of those qualifications is a mandatory qual. So bi-yearly, you have to try to qual. And every year, it's mandated by law. If you don't qualify, you're not fit for duty.
And is that for law enforcement specific, or is that for anybody's right to carry?
That's law enforcement specific as far as I know. Security, interestingly enough, you qualify once. And that's the legal standard in Illinois. At least it was when I was a security guard, again, like 14 years ago before I had law enforcement credentials. You qualified once, and then it was up to the company to decide if you qualified more than that. And most of them did it on a yearly basis.
And Russ, what is it for you guys in corrections? Is it twice a year or once a year?
The last time that I checked, there were, and like I say, things change so fast, but there was 2 different standards. Everybody has to qualify yearly. If you're actually assigned to an armed post, you have to qualify every 90 days. Really? Yes.
Wow. I know we basically, in some states, they just keep it in general. Like basically, if you qualify once a year, that's what it is. It doesn't specify by the post, but I love that idea. And I also, like in some states, if you do have an armed post, or like let's say your Rover Patrol, they will send you out for specific training regarding that post, which would include pullovers. Now, I noticed that we touched on crime scene. Obviously, as a police officer, you do get training in preservation of a crime scene, right, Tommy?
Yeah, depending on the level of offense that it is how far we'll go with that preservation. But yeah, a crime scene could be anything.
What's cool about it here is a lot of people don't realize that in corrections, obviously crimes still occur, and a lot of people don't realize that we also receive the training for crime scenes, because obviously we're the ones that are going to help the case make it to the court system. You know what I mean? So basically, it's really dependent on the officers of the scene, the supervisors, to maintain that crime scene. And just as an opinion from your perspective, Tommy, do you feel that that's something that corrections should be getting trained in?
Well, obviously, anything you guys can do to keep the worst of the worst there instead of back out here where I got to deal with them, I'm totally for. That's great. You know, and people more and more, they want to see that physical evidence. And it's something that I wonder, let me ask you a question. It's a problem for us keeping a crime scene intact. It takes an enormous amount of manpower for us. Like a homicide happens in the middle of the street, or we get somebody that's stabbed. Just had that last night, in fact. And it's in the middle of the street. Now we've got the whole neighborhood gawking, and we're taping off an area. It might take 8 or 10 guys just to keep people out of it, let alone preserve what's on the ground. So if you combine that with bad weather, it becomes a big disaster for us trying to preserve a crime scene, especially when it's outside. And even inside a house, you'll have 10 or 12 people living in a house. They've all decided to squat together in the same house, and something happens. Now we've got people picking up knives, trying to move things around. Somebody's trying to mop the blood off the floor. What are some of the challenges that you guys get with preserving crime scenes in a correctional environment?
Wow, that is an amazing question, Russ. You want to go first?
Yeah, let me tell you one thing about working corrections is I have managed some enormous crime scenes. I've managed some riots of over 200, 300, 400 people on a yard that's quarter to half an acre in size. And you get that many people out there and multiple little fights breaking out and weapons and broomsticks being broken and a guy stabbed here. It's a real challenge, especially because we usually have to get a response team out there and start cuffing operations, and then trying to identify where everyone was when you cuffed them, so that you can go back and figure out where they were on a video. Because otherwise it's almost impossible to do if you don't have an idea of where a guy came from. So we would do things on an industrial scale, where we'd have really large diagrams, and I'd have what I call my scribes out there, and we'd be going to certain groups of inmates and looking at their face, seeing if they got their ID card on, identifying them, writing them down, and boy, let me tell you, it really takes a lot of coordination with everyone that's out there, because I might have 2 teams of 10 guys out there with 40 millimeter launchers, and I got other guys out there cuffing people, and then unfortunately I start having looky-loos come from everywhere and trying to keep them out. So starting my logs and all that stuff, it's a real challenge. It really is.
I would also say, Tommy, I don't know for you guys, but we're rushed as well. We have to get that facility back to running in an orderly fashion. So we hold a crime scene for too long. You get unrest, you get the families calling in. So I would like to think that, we do what we can. We're swift with it a little bit, but again, we still have to make sure that we get what's needed. So we have to lock it down in some cases, especially the area that's affected. So if it happens in a housing unit or a yard, you're locking everything down. You got the inmates that are getting upset. Eventually they'll call the families, the media starts coming in. And it's funny because they want us to be effective, but they want to limit our means and how effective we could be. And also, you only, I'm sure with your case too, once it's open, but we only have one shot at this, because once we open up the area again, you're going to have movement all over the place. I don't know if you have something in a house, you can still close the house off. For us, we may not be able to do that. If we have something in a day area or a yard, once it's been cleared by the investigative division to open, there is no going back to check it out, because at that point, people have been walking through it. It just becomes, you get that one chance. But when I did an episode with Gary York on the preservation of crime scenes, I was shocked the amount of response I got back from our COs who aren't taking those courses. And to me, that becomes frustrating with the investigative agency, because I'm sure those officers are making bad decisions in how to store the evidence, how to maintain record of people that are going on the scene. Let me ask a question, Tommy. For you guys, do you know how long that training is for crime scene preservation?
We have evidence technicians. We have people that specialize in just that, and that's a 40-hour class.
Oh, that's good.
So at the academy, we learn enough to get our guys, like, you're going to go out, this is going to happen, something happens, don't touch it, back everybody away, and do scene security on it, and then you call in detectives and investigators and evidence technicians, and the evidence technicians will come in, and they start processing the scene itself. And the evidence technician class, I think, is 40 hours here. I've never done it, because that's a lot of paperwork, and I already have enough.
But you actually take the initial training, right? How to maintain the scene until someone comes on the scene?
Yes. And that's at the academy level. And then when you, like, the big thing about law enforcement is everybody thinks that training ends. Like, you go to the academy, you spend your 16 weeks, and then it's like, on the road, all these people have between 16 weeks and 6 months of field training. That's what I do for a living, is I take somebody that's straight out of the academy and be like, well, you've learned this stuff at the academy, now we have to learn how to apply it.
Right.
Apply it effectively at the street level. So at the academy, you learn, don't touch stuff unless the weather's really bad and you have to, and try to preserve evidence and try to take pictures if you can't, leave it right where it's at. But how do you then apply that? How do you actually physically do it out on the road? At the academy, it's a very short class. And in real life, it's having to apply it in the real world on real scenes and kind of think on your feet to be able to preserve those scenes, especially when we have something like what you were just talking about with the yard. We have a similar problem with, up here, we have I-94. It goes up and down, right down the middle of Chicago, and it goes right through some very bad neighborhoods, and our gangbangers like to shoot back and forth at each other on the expressway from car to car. So now you've got a 4-mile-long crime scene where you're out there with the troopers trying to help pick up shell casings. Wow. This isn't something there's a class for. It's like, oh, this is a problem. How are we going to solve this? Well, it looks like we're blocking off all these entrance ramps all the way down I-94, blocking off the road. We're going to have to use salt trucks to block the road off, and we're going to come out here and pick up shell casings. And so it's not so much difficult. It's not so much the class that's difficult. It's taking those concepts and then applying them in the real world. And that's why I have free field training. Is like, that's the stuff that people don't think about, the actual application in the real world. And that's where the magic happens. There's the science of law enforcement, and there's the art. And the art happens in field training after they get out of their initial training. So our initial training might only be 8 hours, I think, in the academy, might even be 4, on crime scene preservation and like lifting prints and stuff like that. But it's how you apply that in the real world that becomes like the big overwhelming course. And that's one of those things you're never done learning about.
And can I tell you something? That's where me and Russ always talk about the difference between learning from the book and then obviously gaining that experience to go ahead and find out exactly what that book means. And that carries us into also the probationary time of someone either on the road or walking a tier. So what is the probationary time for someone, like on the job training, if you will, from someone that leaves the academy and then starts their first day, in a cruiser? How long are we looking at?
See, that's not set statutorily in Illinois. Now, nationwide, there's 2 models. There's 3, but there's 2 that most people use. There's the San Jose model and the Sokolov model of field training. And both of them run between 16 and 20 weeks as your recommended minimum time in field training. The problem is it's not statutorily set in Illinois or in most states. And so, like we were talking about before we started this stream conversation, there are some places that, because that's not set, they just disregard it entirely. Or they'll abridge it to the point where it's nonsensical. You'll have some agencies, some very small agencies, that'll have a 2-week field training time where they just put the new person in the car with someone that's been doing it for a year and a half and say, oh, you learn how to do this from them. And there's no paperwork, there's no documentation. I know as an administrator, Anthony, I'm sure you understand where that documentation, when you have somebody that's on probation, what happens if they go wrong and you haven't documented anything?
Yeah,
That's a huge liability, huge problem for law enforcement agencies. So most agencies, places that you would want to work, run between 16 and 20 weeks, and they'll put each person with 4 or 5 different field training officers. So very often I'm a primary FTO, so someone will come to me straight out of the academy. They have no idea what's going on outside of what they learned at the police academy, and I start them off with, here's how you check the car, check the fluids, the spotlights, things like that. And then once I get them to the point where they kind of look like a cop, we send them to the phase 2 person who teaches them a little more, and the phase 3 person that teaches them a little more. And as they go along, we're doing our job and teaching them how to do it as we're going. And then they'll come back to me at the end, and I will say, we'll do a check ride. First 2 weeks, I sit in the car with them. They do all the work. The second 2 weeks, I'm in plain clothes, and I just kind of watch what they're doing and make sure that they're all right, that they're not going to be a liability, that they're not going to hurt themselves, that they're not doing illegal things, they're not going to be a danger to the public. And then we let them go. That's the minimum. Very often people will get recycled, which is when they can't finish all the tasks they're supposed to finish in phase 2. They'll have to do phase 2 again, or they'll have to do phase 3 again, or we'll have an extension of training if for some reason, we get stuck with something that, we work midnight shifts 3 months in a row and they've never been able to tow a car that's abandoned on the road. They'll get an extension of training. So it's very unusual for someone to actually get through in that minimum 16 to 20 weeks. Normally it goes longer than that. But that's kind of your time from getting out of the academy to they're off on their own in their own car. It's 16 to 20 weeks. Some places go longer, and some places, again, because it's not statutorily set, like Chicago, for a long time, I have friends in Chicago that there are FTOs, and they said that CPD was putting 3 probationers in the car with them.
Wow.
So how are you supposed to teach? Maybe you could teach, but how are you supposed to teach and then document for 3 probationers? It's hard enough to do 1. That's why I don't want to be a supervisor. My bosses are like, why don't you take the sergeant's test? Dude, I have enough trouble supervising 1 person. Why do I want to supervise 12? But that's kind of the gambit of field training where I'm at, and it's very similar, I know, across the border in Indiana. Indiana has very similar requirements with field training and kind of a similar setup.
Well, you know what? You mentioned something key from the administrative level. Basically, all that training is done. I know it sounds weird, but to keep the individual responsible so it doesn't fall back on the agency where we're sending out people that aren't properly trained. So there is that level that we expect them to sign off, taking responsibility for the training that they receive. So it's sad. I hate to say this, but that's why there's always that divide when something happens, at least in the prison setting, where let's say you have a death of an inmate. There's going to be that immediate divide between management and front line. It's sad to say, but it's true, because front line is maybe going to try to push something up about policy, and management is going to want to make sure that policy was followed. So again, it's, did we give them the training? Yes, and they signed off that they received it. So it's giving the responsibility back to the individual. Now, granted, if the training's not there, or like you said, you got someone that just didn't meet that 16-20 week, what's the next step? Do we provide them with another chance? Most likely we do. And then at that point, if they still don't do it, the reason why we have to let them go is because liability-wise, the person is not able to do the job, and we're going to be held responsible because of our effort not to let the person go. Now, Russ, real quick, when it comes to the probationary period in corrections, how does that work with the COs that are coming right out of the academy? And by the way, that's if they get an academy first. Sometimes they get on-the-job training and then the academy, but I want to talk about it from the academy to on-the-job training.
Well, first of all, fortunately here in California, everyone has to complete the academy first. There's no going around that. Now, the last probation agency that I worked for, that was not the case. People could simply be hired after having their background done, and then they could just from there go directly to their posts. California Department of Corrections, however, does not allow that. You have to fully complete the academy. You have to be fully sworn in before you can assume even a single post. Now, beyond that, I'm not sure if it's stayed the same or if it's been increased to a year. When I went through, it was a 9-month probationary check on you, and then we had 2 years that was called an apprenticeship program, where you had to complete a number of hours in each specific thing, everything from crime scene to transportation to just name it, safety and security, all of those things. So it was, 2 years, you had to complete X number of hours in each thing. So that part was good. The bad part is that they were relying upon you to simply put the hours down there and have any supervisor sign off on it on the end of the month. So there was no true accountability for it. Now, the good thing is now CDCR has instituted an FTO program, but I really don't know anything about it except that I've seen some of it in print. And of course, now being retired and out of the system, I really don't know if that's improved things or not. Because a lot of times, it was dependent on just some officer with a lot of gumption to take, a youngster under their wing and lead them around. But there was nothing in your post orders that said you had to do that. So that was the bad thing.
Also, speaking of on-the-job training, I also like to think that training is pretty much done every day in our profession, including the changing of memos, the changing of policies. So I always appreciate supervisors that there's twofold here. When there's a changing of policy or a memo or whatnot, they go to the officers. I would like to have lineup, and we'll get with that momentarily because that's something that my audience is going to want to know a little bit more about because a lot of places have done away with lineup. But a lot of the supervisors will go to the employee, make sure they understand the policy. But here's what a lot of places lack. They don't have the employee sign anything that shows that they were giving the change of policy, because that's where the liability goes from one hand to the other. So if there's a change of policy, as a supervisor, I would go to the units, talk to each of the officers, and then I would have them sign a policy. Now, this isn't a receipt that I've given you the policy and you received it. I was actually having them sign an acknowledgement that you understand, and if you have any questions, come to me. Now, if something happens, the officer wouldn't be able to say, well, I didn't know. No, you did know. So now the concern I have now is, and I was talking to Tommy before, and Russ knows this, we used to have what they call lineup. So basically before each shift, there was an overlap where there was this exchange of information, what happened during the day, and just information that's needed, whether it's specific to a housing unit or just in generally for the facility or the agency. And we did away with that. Now, you guys have something similar to lineup, correct, Tommy? What is that? Like a shift briefing?
Every day we come in 15 minutes before the start of the shift. It's actually part of our paid time. So we have our days are 8 and a quarter hours. And that first 15 minutes is briefing, where we go over what the beat assignments are for the day, if there's anything special going on, if we've got warrants out for anybody, and what happened in the previous shifts. Because there's 2 8-hour blocks of the day that I'm not there, and I don't know what happened in town in those 8-hour blocks. I find it kind of weird that in a correctional environment, you wouldn't be doing the same thing. Like, wouldn't there be stuff going on in the 18 or 12 hours that you're not there that you need to know about before you hit the floor?
It's sad, Tommy, because we lost that a few years back. Not all places. Some places still have it, but most places don't. I did a community question, and the percentage was like in the 70% that lineup was done. In my opinion, was done just to save money. But again, lineup was also good for a lot of other reasons, even besides information. Employee morale, good chance to recognize people for doing something that, was needed, and also there's sometimes, especially in the prison setting, we spend a lot of our time surrounded by I call it the other side, but technically a lot of our time obviously is dealt directly with inmates. You could have officers that work in very isolated areas that technically spend 8 hours of their day literally around inmates and barely ever getting that support staff to come in and just kind of, be that little bit of a connection for them to the side that they're supposed to be on. So lineup was always a good chance for us to have that interaction, to communicate, and just to show how important we are to each other. And again, it was sad because when we got rid of lineup, there were officers that were getting back to me from a state level now. These are different facilities all across the country that are saying that they haven't seen their coworkers in years because, just the fact that they report directly to the unit and maybe they're another housing unit officer, so there's really no reason for them to connect. And again, it messes with the employee morale and the relationship at the workplace. Now, Russ, when you saw lineup was being taken away, because it was actually taken away at least I think it's the trend started happening a few years back. But I know a lot of facilities did have the lineup, and then we just started seeing some states, in order to save money, they got rid of that quarter block of time, that 15 minutes. That would either be before you come in to exchange the information. And the problem with that also is that now people come in just within their time to start their shift. So I can't hold the other person responsible for wanting to stay an extra 5 minutes to exchange information. So there's always that the fact that it puts a supervisor in a tough spot, because I can't tell the guy to come in 5 minutes early. I can't tell the other guy to come in 5 minutes late. But Russ, you've seen that happen, correct? When they got rid of lineup, you saw certain changes that you felt just were not going to work well with the department in regards to safety and security and just overall employee morale.
Well, regrettably, in CDCR, we never had that. And so it was incumbent upon the supervisor to try and deal with it. The thing that finally made things a little bit easier for me as a supervisor was when everybody got email. So what I would do is, the good thing is that our supervisors would come in half an hour before the other shift would start, so we could at least be on page with the other supervisor. But once all of my officers got email, what I would do is then I'd sit down, figure out who was going to be on my shift in my unit, and then if there was anything at all important going on, I'd dash it off to them in an email, or I'd try and catch them where they entered the unit, and then that way everyone had the same information. But yeah, it was hard, and the bad thing about just the email thing is, as they were coming on, they didn't have a chance to shoot back and say, and have their input and say, hey, well, you guys had that happen, but the day before I saw XYZ, and it's something that details with it. So yeah, the whole intel setup, as it's very much more difficult to deal when you don't have a set prescribed procedure where everyone can sit down, get a briefing. I would have loved to have had that, but just never did.
Hey, Tommy, I got to ask you a question. So in your world, being a police officer, what would happen if they decided to save money, get rid of the overlap, get rid of the shift briefing? How would that affect you guys?
We couldn't function.
Wow.
That's not even a functional solution. And then we couldn't send it on email because the email's not secure. We have to give out sensitive information. I mean, like pictures of, suspects and offenders and things, their warrant, what it's for, where they're living, all that stuff goes on sheets that we get at the beginning of the day for our briefing. We couldn't just send it out on blast on email. And if we did, there are some arguments that would make everything that's on our phone subpoenaable, because you're emailing people, and they're receiving it on their phone. I'm assuming with you guys on your way into work, I don't know how it is there, but like I can't even bring, like if I'm dropping a prisoner off, I can't even bring a phone into Cook County Jail. Like it gets locked up with my gun when I'm on my way in. I couldn't even imagine. That's why when you said that was taken away, it's like I couldn't even imagine functioning properly without everyone coming into a room and being like, yeah, this is going on. 2 nights ago, this brother stabbed this brother, and now everybody knows about it on all 3 shifts. And so, last night when he stabs him again, like when we hear that address come out, the 365 45th place, I go, oh, I know that at 365 45th place, that guy tried to stab that other guy, and now we're getting a call there of, a disturbance involving a knife. Well, now I know what's going on, and we know to send more people there. I couldn't even imagine not having a briefing at the start of shift where everybody can get together and exchange information. Just not just the top-down flow of information from the supervisors to us, like, hey, we were here, the last shift told us this, so you guys know this is what's going on. But then the upswing of information from the ground level, like the boss says, hey, they had a fight, 3 fights at this house last night. Oh, well, 2 weeks ago he tried to stab him, and the boss wasn't there that day. Oh, well, we didn't know that he tried to stab him 3 weeks ago. Yeah, let's look it up in the computer system. Hey, look, that's the incident. There's a history here, but it didn't happen at that. Like our computer system logs by address, and not everything happens at people's homes. So like, yeah, they had that 3 fights last night. Well, he tried to stab him at Walmart 4 nights ago. You guys didn't know about that? No, well, go look it up under Walmart. That guy tried to stab the other guy, and now we're having disturbances at that house again. I can't even fathom showing up to work and being like, no, you guys can't brief anymore because you got to save 15 minutes. I don't get it. I couldn't function.
Well, when it started to happen to us, the problem was that we started losing the communication immediately because people said, okay, well, if we're not going to get paid the overlap, then we're going to come in right when shift is starting. So it's at 2 o'clock. The other officer, they're ready to go out the door. You're not going to hold them a minute or two later. But don't get me wrong. There are still a lot of our officers that take the hit anyway because they want to know the information because they feel that their life depends on that information. So what gets me upset is that the department itself, or these departments that may not do the overlap, they're not really protecting our officers by giving them a chance to get the information they needed to be effective in the unit. And as you said, kind of deal with what's going on or what they don't know because they haven't been there. And that was a big thing when when I saw how many facilities don't do it no more. And then when you ask them, the only response that you're going to get is, it is about the money. And I said, yeah, but you guys have to think bigger than that because the exchange of information, especially in our world, is paramount. And now you're limiting the officer's ability to be effective and to be put in the know. Because now here's the sad thing too, is the inmates know more about what's going on in the unit or at the facility than the staff does. And that's sad. And Russ, I again, like Tommy said, I don't know how you guys function without ever having a lineup. I mean, is that because some people would come in early and just deal with it on their own time?
Well, there was a combination of things that happened, including a lawsuit about walk time and doffing and donning gear. And, some people were really trying to do a good job and get there early. And then the lawsuit happened. And then people were, after that, then management was locking people out until 3 minutes before, all kinds of crazy stuff, So it was a big problem caused by both the union and management and everything else, when they should just do is bite the bullet and find a way to have a briefing. But but in fairness, I would say management, the institutions that I've worked at are so huge that it's a logistical nightmare to actually get it done. Because I've especially like when I was working at San Quentin, we'd have maybe 300 or 400 officers on duty at a time.
I got you. So the layout itself, but that also puts a lot of pressure on the immediate supervisor, who now is going to have to distribute that information. Because the key here is that again, it's sad to say, but you got to hold the front line responsible. So if I'm not getting the information out to them, I can't hold them responsible if something goes wrong. It's going to be it's going to point right back at administration. So I understand what you're saying, but obviously now a lot of the supervisors are now going to be held responsible. But I would think that we could do quadrant briefings then. Like you have 400 officers, so if the jail breaks itself up in like 6 or 7 different parts, you can go ahead and have the supervisor of those areas hold those quadrant briefings, if you will. Now, guys, before we come to a close, because I know everybody's busy and it's Sunday morning, and I believe today is the Super Bowl, so there's another sacrifice that you guys made. But I wanted to get one last question, and this goes to Tommy, and then I'd like to get Russ' thoughts on this. Right now, obviously, corrections does fight for that recognition, and being in the field for over 16 years, I've always felt the recognition for law enforcement is deserved, especially when you find that a lot of my followers are very interested in the videos that you would put out, Tommy. That's because there is a relationship between the needs of police and the needs of corrections. I mean, yeah, of course, there are different types of dangers. Obviously, police deal with the unknown, and we actually have stuff pretty much contained, but we deal with just the impulse of human behavior a lot. But you guys have a lot of unknown factors that really make officers' jobs obviously very dangerous. The one thing that we have that doesn't work for us, that may work for police a little more, is the power of the uniform. Inmates are conditioned to our uniform. We don't have that immediate presence of authority that police may get when they come on a scene, because, as he said, the inmates that are in these facilities, they're used to the uniform. They've accustomed themselves. They actually look right at the individual as opposed to the uniform. Trust me, if you get pulled over by the same cop for 30 days in a row, it's no longer the uniform. That person can be like, yo, Russ, what's your problem? Tommy, what's your problem? As opposed to us, we deal with that every day. But do you think that there is a connection or a completed circle with the work of corrections and police? And if there is that connection, how can we make it better? What would you expect from us in regards to completing that circle? And then I'm going to ask Russ what we may expect from police to complete the circle.
I've never, the funny thing where I'm at is that I like to tell people in other places there's rivalries, and here it just seems like there's so much work to do that people don't have time for rivalries. And maybe that's just a Chicago area thing, but I run into guys all the time from the Illinois Department of Corrections, and normally the longest conversation that we have about anything work-related is like, how are we going to get these handcuffs to this guy, and I got to take this guy over here, and he's got to go over there. I don't have a lot of interaction unless I'm dropping someone off at the jail. And when I am there, all I'm overwhelmed with is the enormous smell and the noise inside the Cook County Jail and the filthy conditions. And I'm like, well, I'm glad I don't have this job. You know, like, and I kind of feel sorry for people that don't ever have to make it from police work, that don't ever have to make it into a prison or into a large jail like Cook County Jail. Because we have Lake County Jail in Indiana right across the border, and there it's like going into a large police station. You go in, it's clean, everything smells nice, people have showered. You go to a big facility, and it's I don't think people have an understanding in law enforcement all the time that it's just nasty. And so I really don't understand like there being a rivalry at all, and completing the circle of respect in law enforcement. Like, any cop that's been inside of a large jail or a prison understands that's a hard job. And you've been on live streams with me on, you know, my channel before, my YouTube channel before. I'm like, that's not a job that I would want to have. I have a lot of respect for it. And I think that the guys that don't have a lot of respect for it in law enforcement are people that either have never been there. Some don't even have a temporary holding facility in their police department. That's something to think about. Some cops, they drop directly off to the jail. They don't ever have to deal with prisoners. We have a temporary holding facility where I'm at. Right now, there's 10 guys in there. I know that's nowhere near having a dorm with 50 idiots in it, but 10 idiots is enough to watch for me. Getting stuck in the office, having to watch the 10 idiots like rattling the bars and stuff and driving you nuts. I don't want to do that for a living. And so having had that experience, like, there's no rivalry for me. Like, Illinois Department of Corrections guys come in. Hey, could you help us with that? Yeah, sure. I'll help you here. I'll hold the door open. You load the idiots into the van. That's fine. I know there is that in some places, and I think it's mostly people that are either very new on the job and think they're better than everyone, which you're going to get that. There's hacks in every profession. Or people that have just never seen the environment. They don't know what they're talking about. They think that in a jail or in a prison, you can just be like, well, just close the door. They're in there, right? Just close the door. Well, how's this? That's why I was asking about your evidence processing procedures. Like, how hard is it in a prison? Like, I've seen there's like 6 entrances and exits to everything. And yet, theoretically, you could close it off, but that doesn't always solve the problem. Now you got dudes in there stabbing each other with it closed off. That doesn't help anything. You know, and I think a lot of people that don't have that overlapping respect, I think a lot of them just haven't seen what you've done. And I get that. I understand it because I get that from the public all the time. People like, being a cop, drive a big luxury car, carry a gun around. I own a luxury car. I own a gun. And you're like, there's the science of it, and then there's the art of it, man. And like, yeah, the science of it, you could probably come on the job, and if you're a really squared away dude, and, you know, you were in the military for 4 years, and you know how to drive really well, and you can shoot really well, and you can fight with people really well, and you know how to use handcuffs, you might start off at the level of a guy that just came out of the academy, but that's not the job. And so I kind of understand where some cops come in and they go like, I know how to use handcuffs. I know how to fight with people. I can close a cell door. How hard is this? Well, obviously there's an art to it, or they wouldn't have 400 guys at San Quentin trying to keep control over a few thousand people. They'd have 20 dudes, right? Yeah. If it was that easy, it's not that easy. It couldn't possibly be. And that's kind of where I come from with it. It's the same thing with fire departments and everything else. Like, yeah, I know how to spray water on a fire, but in reality of it, you start talking to firefighters about the work that they do and the air, you know, flow of air and heat through a building. I mean, I can put water on a campfire, but that's totally different than dealing with a house fire. But I have enough respect from dealing with the campfire. No, I don't want to deal with the house fire. And I have enough respect from dealing with 10 idiots in a temporary holding facility to know I don't want to deal with 200 in a jail. And that's kind of my take on the whole thing. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that you hit it right on the spot and then some. And Russ, real quick, what would be your thoughts on just that circle and that line of respect for both parties?
Oh, I've interacted with a lot of different agencies. I have massive respect. Sometimes, of course, human beings being what they are, there's conflicts. Sometimes I may not understand what they do. They may not understand what I do. I've always had good luck with telling them though, and breaking it down for them that for me, I'm like the beat cop in a city where everyone is a felon, and that we use the same penal code and we respond to robberies, thefts, arson, rapes, burglaries, assaults, stabbings, the whole 9 yards. Same penal code, same thing, but it's much more condensed down. It's it's much more undiluted than it is there. I'd say I think the one thing that that we really deal with is we almost never have a chance to actually do something good for someone. We're not out there able to recover someone's property and stuff. And so, we're really under the gun and under the microscope for the whole duration of each of our shifts. There's no chance to get away from it. There's no chance to take a break. There's always hundreds and hundreds of guys out there on the yard, and you're dealing with them, day in, day out. But like I say, it's just, the beat in the worst city in the world.
I'll tell you something, Russ, just for having a conversation like this, these are great conversations that we can have that can kind of bridge that dialogue and bring respect to both professions, obviously, because people do want to know, they're thirsty for the knowledge, and instead of them getting it from some source who has no experience, we're providing them outlets. We're saying, hey, listen, if you really want to know, why are you going to go to someone who's only seen it from the outside? Why not go to someone from the inside? So here we are, someone from corrections, someone from the, and just trying to find a way to kind of build a better understanding so we could be more effective at our job. Not instead of working in isolation, we kind of work together to move forward. So thank you guys for taking the time. Obviously, Russ, we're always moving, keeping that Keepers of Chaos going on Facebook. So if you guys haven't, check out the page. And guys, and again, for Tommy, the reason why I started following Tommy is because Tommy's been always respectful to the profession. That's key to me. I have followed his channel for over a year now, I believe. And I see him posting stuff of mine or liking my stuff on Instagram. I believe he sees that we have similar interests. And the first thing I remember, one of the first comments I got from him was basically, you're right. He goes, I wouldn't do the profession, but the respect he had for the profession. And I think at that point I needed that. I embraced that. And ever since then, I just follow his channel because it's just a channel with great information, just a lot of good content that our side can definitely use. I know that for a fact. And just generally, just the profession. You have someone here who's devoting his time and effort, just to get the information out there. And I like why it started. It's the same thing as me. He didn't start to make money. He didn't start to make a name for himself. He started because something was needed. Something was lacking. And he felt that he had the power to complete that gap. And I have tremendous respect because it comes on your own time, Tommy. So again, much love to your channel, Free Field. Much love to you. Again, guys, check out Free Field Training. I'm going to steal one of Tommy's little quick clips of the video and post it up there. Hopefully Tommy doesn't put a strike on me. And yeah, and I'll go ahead and thanks again, guys, for taking part in the show. And guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work that front line. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.